At 29, it became more and more acute. And one night, the thought came into my head. I describe it very briefly at the beginning of the Power of Now, in the middle of the night. I can't live with myself any longer. There was such intense unhappiness, and the depression, it was just too much to take. At that moment, an inner separation happened. I couldn't have explained exactly at that time, but retrospectively I can explain now what happened because I understand it. I didn't then. An inner separation happened between the unhappy self and a deeper sense of I or beingness, which I now call consciousness itself. So I had been identified throughout my life with an unhappy mind-made entity consisting of self-images and ideas and self-talk in the mind. It's the self-talk that most people are familiar with, but in my case it was particularly destructive and unpleasant. But everybody is familiar with the self-talk in the head. I sometimes call it the voice in the head, which are quite simply the automatic, compulsive, one could say, thought processes that never stop, that either comment on your sense perception, whatever is happening around you, a running commentary. You might recognize that, it might be familiar to you. If you don't recognize it, then you're so identified with it that you don't even know that you have a running commentary on your life. You become the running commentary in your life. In other words, that, as happened to me, become totally identified with the compulsive thinking that never stopped. That voice in the head that in my case was predominantly negative, and so the emotions that then I felt continuously were the reflection of the predominantly negative self-talk about myself, about other people, about the situation I found myself in. There was ample justification for negative self-talk because I was struggling, I didn't have enough money, I was trying to prove myself, working too hard, had problems with, couldn't find a girlfriend, was too shy, all kinds of twisted up inside. And so basically there was this unhappy me, but at that night I disidentified from it and stood back from it, so to speak, and I suddenly thought, this thought that came to my head, I can't live with myself any longer. There was a stepping back from the thought, and I thought, are there two of me or one? What does that mean? I can't live with myself. Who am I, and who or what is that self that I cannot live with? Then that thought brought about the separation, and then there was an I, and then this unhappy me was somehow recognized as not real. But at that time I couldn't have explained it. It was this very strange experience. All I can say is the next morning I woke up feeling totally at peace, and just opening my eyes, looking around the room, and everything seemed fresh and new. The light coming through the curtains, the simplest objects lying in the table had a certain presence, a benign, wonderful presence to them. Everything I acknowledged, and it was lovely, and there was this underlying peace. And what is this? And then I was living in London at the time. I got on a bus, even going through central London on the bus. Everything seemed so peaceful. All the people running around the city, everything was so peaceful. This is so strange. And then I bought a notebook, and I started a diary, and I started with this first entry was, I don't know what happened to me, but it's something weird. I just have to write this down in case I lose it again. But somehow it stayed with me. It didn't, the intensity had variations in it of the piece, but basically there was always, since then, always some piece in the background of my life. So that was a shift in consciousness, and much later when I started to investigate other spiritual traditions, Buddhism and mystical Christianity, Gnosticism, Sufism, Zen Buddhism, also the great Hindu teachers. Gradually, I began to understand that what happened to me, they call awakening or spiritual awakening. And so the understanding wasn't there. There was just the experience of it at first.